Hi guys, I'm here with a wonderful gentleman today from the US of A. He is a teacher and a renowned author of several parenting books, including one called Parenting with Love Without Anger or Stress. He is a public speaker, a seminar leader, and a consultant on issues relating to parenting. He has attracted the attention of local and national media. He hosts his own radio show. He routinely consults with the nation's leaders in the fields of psychology, education and child behaviour. He has been dubbed the guru of parent temper control. This gentleman regularly appears on TV, in national magazines, and he is a highly sought-after keynote speaker and seminar leader and consultant. His practices centre around principles by Maria Montessori. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you Bob Lancer.
Hello.
Hi, Bob. Lovely to have you with us today on the call.
It is entirely my honor to be with you.
Awesome. Now, I would like you to start, please, by just, if you could tell me a little bit, for those of us that don't know anything about the Montessori methods, could you possibly outline in a few sentences? Is that possible?
Well, the simple statement of it is that it's based on understanding of the child. Instead of simply imposing a way of relating to the child, one observes the child closely to recognize what is actually bringing out the child's best. One of the most common mistakes I see being made in parent-child relationships, and I do a lot of work with teachers and child care professionals as well, but the most common mistake that I see happening is that parents tend to confuse a harsh emotional reaction with effective child guidance. Or they'll confuse simply imposing or establishing rules as the way to lead a child to behave in an appropriate manner. What they overlook is the fact that there are correct ways of correcting and directing, and there are incorrect ways of correcting and directing. Simply reacting against a behavior that you do not like is not an effective way of leading a child to improve self-control.
Yes, that's interesting that you use the word reacting. I think sometimes as parents we need to watch how we react. Now, I've been reading a brochure that you've put out about 37 practical parenting points, and it says here that we need to focus on our own behaviour to see the ways that we contribute to the outcomes that we don't want.
Exactly. What we tend to do unconsciously is make the child responsible for how we behave. If I react to my child with impatience or frustration, I automatically presume it's his fault. But that places the child in charge. That means the child is the one who's responsible, not me. Now, once you start focusing on how your behavior is impacting the child, once you start basing your way of relating to the child on observation instead of just an emotional reaction and then a logical justification for what you did, a whole world opens up. And you start recognizing that the child is actually showing you how to win with her and how to win for her and how to win for yourself. But you have to pay very close attention to what you're doing and to the impact that you're having on the child. The way I phrase it in my seminars is simply to look at your reactions as a cause instead of as an effect. If you look at what your reactions are causing, that gives you the power to change what you're doing for different results. But if you look at your reaction as an effect of the child's behavior, that places you in the role of a victim, and it means the child has no real leader to guide her.
Yes, this is all very interesting, Bob. I'm listening to you say about this justification thing, and I think when we justify the way we act with our children, sometimes we do become the victim, and when we do that, we do lose the power and the ability to make those changes, don't we?
Yes, and beyond that, we empower the child in a negative way. there are ways of imposing rules on a child that will lead that child to become a rule breaker. Parents are unintentionally reacting to their child in ways that produce rebellious consequences, that produce rebellious behavior from the child. So it's very important to start being more aware. Most parents, when they hear this, are really willing to start paying closer attention, to start taking more responsibility for the impact they're having on their child. But there are a few who will simply justify what they're doing and say, well, look, I think that I have to impose a rule or a boundary on my child. And my answer is usually, yes, you do, but you have to do it correctly. Because if you do it incorrectly, you're going to produce more harm than good. And not only are you going to feel powerless, frustrated, and somewhat humiliated, you're going to lead the child to develop behavior patterns that are going to cause that child problems and grief as that child develops and grows more powerful. Because as the child grows more powerful, at the same time, he will not grow more responsible. So as the child develops irresponsible behavior patterns, the situation gets worse. And the irresponsibility begins when we parents do not take responsibility for what we are doing to our children. We just have this expectation that children are supposed to behave well, but that's like having an expectation that your car is supposed to take you where you want to go. But you've got to do certain things in the correct sequence, in the correct way for that to happen.
Yes. I like what you said, Bob, earlier on about unintentionally, because I think every parent means to do well with their children, but I think sometimes we are ignorant by just not understanding the way some things we do affect our children. And one of the things you say, sorry, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that, yes, most of the time we do. All parents want the best for their children. But if you really pay attention to your motivations when you're feeling angry and frustrated and impatient, you don't want what's best for your child. At that moment, you just want to lash out. At that moment, you're filled with resentment. And when you're filled with resentment, you begin to relate to the child as an enemy, as an adversary, and that's what causes the problems. So one of the things that I teach is to recognize how you are feeling, so that when you find yourself feeling impatient or angry or aggravated or irritated, in that moment, you are out of control. Because in that moment, you really don't want what's best for your child, because emotions, when we are emotional, emotions by nature are selfish. That's why one of the ways that parents really cause their children great suffering is when the parents are having an argument and they're paying no attention to how this argument is actually impacting the child. All they're caring about is getting their own frustrations out of their system, venting their frustrations, winning in this competitive conversation with their mate, not paying any attention at all to how the child is suffering. So what we find that we really need to focus on is maintaining our peace and poise. Maintaining your emotional balance. Because when you are emotionally balanced, that is when you do want what's best for your child, and that is when you are in the right state to determine what you can do for your child. When you're feeling angry or frustrated, if you really look at your motivations, it's not about doing something good for your child.
That's interesting. It's said here that your state radiates, and the more calmly you interact with your child, the calmer your child will be. So is this all about modeling a particular behavior to our children?
It's a combination of modeling, but it's also just pure physics. Your state actually does radiate. How you feel radiates like the sun radiates its warmth. You radiate your moods, your attitudes, your feelings. And when you feel calm and centered and compassionate, everyone around you picks up on that feeling, and to some degree